In this course so far, the primary topic of discussion has been unit testing and a bit of integration testing as well. Those are the most important and widely used types of testing out there. In this section, we will introduce some other types of testing and quickly describe them. This is not going to be a thorough description of such types of testing, rather a quick overview of them. We will talk about smoke testing, regression testing, and a bit about continuous integration. Before we can smoke test our applications, we need to define the key functionalities that our system under test needs to have. You'll understand why this is vital in the next video. So this is the application that we've built in the previous section. We have a table that works as a list of users, and we can remove users by clicking on the delete button. Now, before we proceed, let's add one more feature before we actually list the key functionalities that our application provides. And what this feature actually is a way for us to add new users to the list. Remember that we have created the foundation for adding users. We have an endpoint that adds users to the database, and we also have a service on the service layer that communicates with Mongoose, the ODM for connecting to MongoDB that inserts new users to the database. We don't need a lot of fields to achieve that. We just need a username and an email field, all of them added side by side in an inline form. Finally, I'm going to format this. This is an email. It's the final input. We can use HTML5 to specify that this is an email. All of them are required arguments, and we use Vue.js's vModel attribute to bind those inputs to variables that exist in our code behind file. Finally, we need a button that will solidify the addition of that user to the database. I'm gonna use the Bootstrap's button primary and button block classes to add this button, and the vOnClick event to connect the save method that exists in our code with the click of the button. We need to modify it a bit to accommodate for a better user experience. So we need to first check whether all of the fields have been filled by the user, and only then call the user service. Otherwise, we can either display a message, or in this case, for convenience's sake, I'm going to issue an alert with the message of missing fields. And finally, I'm going to resolve the promise to an empty object since we didn't actually insert a new user. Now let's set the name, username, and email for this new user. Click on the button, and the user is successfully added on the table. I'm going to collapse this, and we are almost ready. We have prepared the method, and we have bound all of the data that we need to create new users to the user interface. Now at this point, let me go ahead and create a new folder called smoke test. And now we are ready to define our application's key functionalities that will be smoke tested, just so we know if the basic functionality of our application remains intact after a change or a deployment. This is the job for a smoke test. For our tests, we are going to need Nightmare.js. This is a familiar framework, a familiar library. We used it in the previous section to perform end-to-end tests on our whole application. So apparently smoke testing is a subdivision of end-to-end testing. So I'm going to go ahead and install npm Nightmare. Make sure that you use Nightmare and not Nightmare.js. The framework may be called Nightmare.js, but the package that comes with npm is actually called Nightmare without the JS in the end. I'm going to save this as a dev dependency since we'll only be running Nightmare either on our development environment before pushing changes to the repository, or on a continuous integration environment that acts as a development environment. You never should run Nightmare.js on production, unless on very specific cases. And we also need a way to quickly generate new users for Nightmare.js to fill in. And this is where Faker.js comes in. Faker is a way for us to generate fake names, fake emails, random numbers, and stuff like that. Faker has a pool of available names, combinations, and emails, so you can rest assured that it will generate random and, until one point, of course, unique users for our database. So I'm going to also install Faker. Now, Faker is something that you may also want to use in your application's logic, so I'm not going to install it as a dev dependency, but this depends on your project's needs. Some projects need random numbers, for example, and Faker can provide them without you having to write a custom function based on math random, so it may be useful to not list it under the dev dependencies category. And those are the 3 key functionalities that we want to smoke test. We want to be able to add a new user, list all users, and delete a user. Everything else is not a priority. It's a commodity. It may be visual bugs. We don't care about visual bugs when we smoke test unless they're interfered with the key functionalities. Also, something that has to do with displaying the users right after deleting or adding a user. This again is not something that you would like to smoke test. You just smoke test basic functionality, the functionality that your app can't exist without, and test whether or not there has been a bug or error in that functionality. This is the role of a smoke test, and we will begin writing our first smoke test with Nightmare.js in the next video.